Chairperson of the ECOWAS Authority and the President of Ghana, Nana Akufo-Addo, has called for a strong regional approach to contain the growing threat of terrorism and extremist activities.
He says insurgents are taking advantage of the poverty situation within member states and the recruitment and indoctrination of the youth in the Lake Chad Basin and the Greater Sahel. He also expressed concern over the porous nature of the borders and the vulnerabilities of the ECOWAS member states.
The Economic Community of West African States has therefore agreed to a $1 billion budget for the financing of activities in the action plan to contain terrorism. Joining us now via Skype from Abuja is Dr. Kabir Adamu, Security Risk Management Specialist and Managing Director, Beacon Consulting Limited. It's good to have you join us right now, Dr. Adamu. Now, the fight against terrorism, certainly no one country can boast of having the capacity and ability to handle it. The approach by the new ECOWAS chairman when he came to Nigeria, from his speech and all of that, a lot of people have said that is the way to go. But if we have to narrow it down to the practicality of it, or if I have to use that word, do you think that $1 billion is something that can wipe out terrorism from the West African sub-region?
Definitely no, Mike. If you consider the fact that we're talking about 15 countries and a vast region, and that the root causes of terrorism, which in summary includes poverty, deprivation, illiteracy, a very poor skill set, then $1 billion is just like a droplet in a vast ocean. But it is a beginning point. If that $1 billion is used judiciously, I've looked closely at the protocol that was signed by ECOWAS in 2019 in Ouagadougou, and that protocol speaks clearly on what we call countering violent extremism, and that is addressing the root causes of terrorism. Now, if all member states would adopt this countering violent extremism, which in short is called CVE, that framework, implement that framework, which, I mean, we shouldn't shy away from it. It's all about good governance, tackling the myriad of governance challenges that are affecting the region. Then it would deny these terrorists the ability to recruit. And it is only when you deny them their ability to recruit that you will probably be talking about the end of terrorism. Unfortunately, currently, we're not doing a very good job at that. So I think the Ghanaian president and the current ECOWAS chairman is speaking a language that hopefully would help the region to address the root causes of terrorism. And it's left for member states right now to look closely at that protocol that was signed in 2019 and seek ways to implement it. $1 billion is a beginning point, but it is just a droplet in a large ocean.
Some have always criticized ECOWAS of not responding adequately to issues of insecurity in the region. And since 2019, this was signed and nothing was done, according to the critics, that perhaps is ECOWAS trying to set the pace at this time to address these issues, and is it going about it in the right direction?
The decision to sign that protocol, it's a good step, because these are countries that are coterminous. They live side by side. If we use Nigeria as an example, where we all live, the challenges that are affecting the Lake Chad Basin, northeastern Nigeria, there is nothing that Nigeria would do and be successful if it does not bring the neighboring countries into the fold. And so signing the agreement on the multinational joint task force that brought the neighboring countries together was a very good step. But because that agreement was not fully implemented, and we've talked about the right of pursuit, where soldiers from each country can go into another country whenever they are pursuing terrorists. You can recall how long it took the countries, even as at today. I mean, as at early this year, the Chief of Army Staff actually commented on that and explained how difficult it was for Nigeria to accept neighboring countries' troops to come into Nigeria. Likewise, the distrust between Nigeria and the neighboring countries stopped Nigerian soldiers from going into the neighboring countries whenever they're chasing terrorists. But on the side of the terrorists, they do not recognize these borders. They're able to crisscross these borders almost freely. Meanwhile, the formal soldiers are unable to do that. So those are the kind of challenges that I think ECOWAS as the region needs to address. The beginning point is the signing of this protocol. The rest will have to be operationalized through sometimes bilateral engagement, and then sometimes again multilateral engagement. One key area is the area of intelligence. These terrorists have links, and they relate among themselves. They transfer sometimes technology, they transfer strategy on how to fight. Now, if you have a central point of intelligence where all the 15 member states are able to share intelligence on the movement of these terrorists, the way they generate funding, and then, of course, more importantly, the way they organize their attacks, then I think each country would be able to contribute whatever little it's able to contribute. One core area that I think the Ghanaian president, as the current chair, needs to address is this issue of having a multinational joint task force, and then on the other hand, a G5, where two major members, Niger and Chad, are members of these two bodies. And unfortunately, the funding for the running of these two bodies is not there. So why have two regional bodies when, in effect, you don't even have funding to run one? Why don't you collapse them into one and then have a regional base, perhaps in one of the countries, that would now look at the two areas? At the end of the day, you are dealing with one problem, which is terrorism, but then you have two bases. And the central to this is the relationship between ECOWAS member states and America, the US, as well as France. If we do not address these differences, these strategic differences between these two countries, the US and France, then we'll continue to have this division, unfortunately, that would stop the member states from meeting their needs, which is to eradicate terrorism.
All right. Now, the burden to raise the funds, deploy the military, bring out strategy and all of that rests to a great extent on Nigeria, being that Nigeria is the big brother. Sometimes in some way they say Nigeria is West Africa and West Africa is Nigeria. If all of this burden rests on Nigeria, considering the fact that Nigeria is handling its own domestic fight against terrorism and some other socioeconomic challenges, what concerns do you have about the feasibility of a multinational approach to fighting terrorism in the region?
I have great concerns. You've painted the appropriate picture. Unfortunately, Nigeria's economy is in the doldrums at the moment, no thanks to COVID-19. And then, of course, the internal socio-economic and political challenges that Nigeria is going through. Now that has limited Nigeria's ability, unfortunately, to play the role, the regional hegemony role that it used to play in the past. And so that means ECOWAS as a region is also being affected by this incapacity of Nigeria to play that role. But having said that, seeing what Nigeria is playing currently in Mali, the former Nigerian president is, as we all know, is playing the mediatory role in the Malian crisis. And of course, we've seen the support given by President Buhari. So there is still that very limited capacity, even though it's limited. And I think, of course, Nigeria would play its role. It's a matter of survival. Sometimes people don't understand that it's not just that Nigeria wants to, it has to. Because if we allow the situation in the sub-region to degenerate, then it will have an effect. We saw what happened to Libya after the unseating and killing of Gaddafi, and the civil war ensued. We saw how weapons from Libya had trickled down to Nigeria and how it affected the internal security challenges in Nigeria. It is still affecting Nigeria. If we had played our role and attempted to, at least take a stand in deciding the future of Libya, perhaps the consequences would not have affected like that.
Now, one of the issues that the ECOWAS chair mentioned was the unacceptable levels of poverty being exploited by the terrorists. When you look at how the pandemic has affected the economies of the countries of West Africa, where does this leave this approach being proposed by the ECOWAS chair? Would it be effective enough?
Frankly, there is no other alternative solution than to address the root causes of terrorism, and poverty is one of the root causes of terrorism. Good governance that can reduce the poverty levels is the way to go. As the new ECOWAS chair, I think this statement meant to galvanize the other 14 leaders of the region into implementing the agreed action plan is the way to go. There is no body of knowledge on counterterrorism that does not speak to addressing the root causes of terrorism, and at no time in our history has this become more important than now. The effects of COVID-19 has ravaged economies in the region, the biggest economy in the region, and as it were in the continent, which is the Nigerian economy, is currently going through a doldrum. Recession is the word that is being mentioned by virtually everyone that understands the economy. And so how much of that would have a ripple effect on the sub-region as a whole? And then, of course, by that, allow the terrorist groups to continue to recruit based on these economic indices. Now, if we agree to this, then it means this is the time for regional leaders, for all stakeholders, to look inwards and see how to enhance the implementation strategy for this agreed protocol in 2019.
All right, Dr. Adamu, a lot of analysts have talked about the issue of governments being more intentional when it comes to some of the approaches. Like you talk about the social issues, the issues of poverty, the issues of infrastructure, because when governments are lacking in so many of those issues, it becomes a challenge. The issue of porous borders, these are all issues that have been on ground even before the coming of insurgents. What is your assessment regarding the intentional nature of government towards addressing these issues? It's one thing to talk about all of them when they gather. It's another thing to come back home and start putting steps together.
If we use Nigeria as an example, Nigeria came up with a beautiful plan, as part of this implementation strategy, which it called the Countering Violent Extremism Framework. It launched that framework. We can go as far back as the Goodluck Jonathan administration, but under the Buhari administration, the revised framework was launched in 2019 by the Office of the National Security Advisor. Now the challenge has been how to get the buy-in of the people. So the federal government launched the plan, but we have not seen any credible or tangible effort to get the state governments to understand this framework. I bet you can ask your correspondents, go to the state government and ask the state governors. Even Borno State, that is the epicenter of terrorism, perhaps it's instrumental to ask the governor of Borno State whether he's aware of that countering violent extremism framework. So what is the point if the federal government launches it, but the governors do not get the buy-in? And so that takes us back to the approach that the regional governments are giving security, where security is seen as a state-centric mechanism and not a people-centered mechanism. And I think that is the challenge. If all of these socioeconomic issues are biting us and we are not addressing them at the root causes at the community level, then unfortunately the dislink between governance and the general populace is what the terrorists are exploiting. And I think that is the way to go. And frankly, I'm very happy with the focus that the Ghanaian president has given. I'm hoping that he will use his tenure to galvanize other leaders in the region to look at those issues from the point of view of community approach and not state-centric.
All right, Dr. Kabir Adamu, Security Risk Management Specialist and Managing Director, Beacon Consulting Limited. Thank you for your time on TVC Breakfast.
Thank you for having me. Stay safe.
And you too.